So, welcome to this series of videos around me learning how to restore with Vellum. It's been a while, but I think I've gotten to a position now where I'm kind of confident enough, I think, that I can give this a go. So what we're looking at here is a 19th century indenture, a legal document. This is quite a lot. It's probably about, I don't know, 2.5 foot by 1.5. It's quite a really nice sort of piece of vellum here. If you ever wondered where the phrase signed, sealed and delivered comes from, it's actually on here. Back then, a legal document you would sign, you'd actually have these guys put here on the side, which is your seal, and then you deliver the document. This cost me $13 on eBay. Everything I'm going to show you today is basically on a shoestring. Not particularly historically significant or valuable, to be honest, but it's very, very difficult to get hold of vellum in any quantity that could be used for restoration. It's either too historically significant in its own right because it's a manuscript or covering an existing book, or it's just too small, too damaged, it's a binder scrap. But the one source of vellum that is still out there are not so old and relatively unimportant legal documents such as this. This is a rental of a piece of land in Philadelphia in the middle of the 19th century. So my plan with this is to bathe it, wash it, and what I'm hoping is, and this may not happen for the printed text, but certainly the ink should come off. And on the back, this sort of Gothic stylistic stuff here, this is all ink. So I think if I soak this for long enough, with any luck, we should have a completely blank piece of vellum on this side, which is really to die for. It's really good. The reason I've gone for this is I did, and I think I put this as a separate video, just experiment with excuse me, with these scraps of vellum. Now these are 400-year-old scraps. This one was just as I pulled it out of the book as I was doing the restoration. This was the one I experimented with by getting it wet, letting it dry, seeing how it behaved. And what I realized was that vellum that's 400 years old, if it's been folded in a certain configuration, it's very difficult to get rid of that fold. And if you sort of flex it along the fold, if it's splitting, it'll continue to split. So what seems to happen is vellum develops a brittleness as the centuries go by. This guy's only 200 years old, and it has a lot of suppleness to it, particularly where it's only been gently folded. I'm a little worried about this middle seam. We'll see whether this fold truly comes out when we wet it, but certainly there's a good amount of sort of real estate at the bottom here that I think could be used, and at the top as well if all the ink comes out. So, what are we going to use this vellum for? First up, and maybe the less important item, is this guy. This is just another sort of 17th century folio, like many others I've restored and posted videos of. This poor guy, unfortunately, had been bound with duct tape, literally duct tape. So it actually took a lot of work to get the tape off and actually save this edge here of the title page and other sections as well. But we were able to do that. It's a perfectly nice book. What's interesting about it is the boards that are in vellum. So this text block's going to have to be completely resewn. It's completely shot. But once I've done that, I intend to use this indenture to actually do a rebacking in vellum. So it'll be interesting to see whether the lessons learned actually enable me to do that. In simple terms, vellum is, one thing I've learned with vellum that's a bit different to leather is it stays flexible. If you wet it, it obviously goes very limp and flexible. And then it stays that way until just the moment when it it obtains that final dryness, and then it sets hard. So the trick is going to be to make sure that we don't end up with a fold here that starts to fail, which is why using the more modern vellum, 200-year-old vellum, hopefully will enable us to achieve that. But the other thing that I'm really excited about is this little guy. This is probably the most exciting purchase I've been able to come across so far in my few years of book collecting. So this was a $57 purchase, and it is an original 1657 copy of a very, very important Puritan work called A Call to the Unconverted. Now this was a guy called Baxter, who was in many ways one of the sort of founding fathers of Puritanism, I guess. Puritanism originated in the UK, and Baxter wrote several sort of large pieces of religious work during his life. But the reason this is important is this was a very simple, humble work that was published. It wasn't designed to be something that would go to a library, sit on a shelf. This was something that would be passed around almost as a piece of propaganda to try and persuade sinners to come back to the fold. So in many ways, it was an appeal from the heart, put down on paper, and the idea was that this would be used and shared and passed around, and literally, like, as I say, a piece of propaganda. It's almost, I've not been able to find, I think WorldCat probably references a few examples in university libraries, but what's interesting is the pagination of those seems inconsistent, whereas the electronic versions do tie out to this. And what basically we have is sort of an essay at the front, the preface, which is basically a letter from Baxter to the reader, basically pleading them to read the book and consider the path of their lives, I suppose. And then it gets into the actual Call to the Unconverted itself, which is a very short work. It's only about 100 pages. And then at the back, there are some prayers and directions. And then, interestingly, at the very, very back is a set of contents. This is an owner's mark here, so obviously Thomas Smith in the 1700s obviously owned the book for a period. But everything about this, the way it's, the font, the way it's laid out, everything says to me that the dates of the preface here, December 31st, I think, 1657. The book itself is dated 1656, I believe. Just have to check that. Yeah, Finiture 1656, December 31st. There we go. Everything about this, in terms of how it's written, says to me that this is an original from that time. It's not a later, any kind of later reprint. Even the fact that there's no obvious title page says to me that this is one of the original copies. I think literally this started with the letter, and then the title page, to the extent it existed, was further in at page 1, right here. So, yeah, I think this is an original copy, and I haven't been able to find any images of an original copy online to confirm, because I don't think they exist. So this is just very, very incredibly rare. Now the covering, that's completely fake. This, just looking at it, the way it was taped here, this leather here, etc. This was probably a early 20th century rebinding that's attempting to look like an early 19th century rebinding. I would suspect when this book was first printed, it was bound in vellum. I think it may have had boards attached, probably not these boards, or more likely it was just a limb vellum, in other words, a glorified paperback. So what I'm going to do with this, as I look at it here, as you can see, these fly papers are much later, different paper, and they're shot anyway. And the boards themselves are coming detached. It's only held in place by 3 sections of twine, which are rapidly failing. There's a lot of modern glue that got dumped in here as well at some point. You can see that there. So what I'm going to do is take the leather off these 2 boards, take off this modern tape as best I can to get back to the text block. I have a strong suspicion that when we do that, we're going to find that these sections of twine here are degraded or failing, or very, very close to failing. So I'm going to rethread or sister those in a very sort of subtle way, bind those back into the boards that at this point will be bare. And then the actual restoration, if all goes well, we'll be using this square of vellum right here, which will be blank. It is blank, but hopefully this section here gives me enough, irrespective of how well the ink comes off from the whole document, that I'm going to be able to actually get this back to what would have been its original vellum state in the middle of the 1600s, which frankly would be a fitting tribute to this book, because it's, you know, this book probably has done some amazing things and had a very hard life. So it's great to see it survive as well as it has. So that's going to be the plan. I'm not going to post too many, videos about the resewing of this guy. There are plenty of other videos where I've done that before. The focus is going to be on how does this vellum behave when it's wet? How much of the ink do we get off? How does it behave as it dries? And that'll help inform how we do the rebinding of this book. Do we keep the boards? Do we go for 100% limp vellum approach? That probably would be nice and authentic, but also ultimately probably not a really long-lived restoration, so we'll probably keep the boards, but we'll see. And the other thing we're going to have to think about, which is really delicate, is just the condition of some of these pages. There's there's some loss here from this first page, as you can see, and this is the really important bit. This is the preface, the essay. So we want to see if there's any way we can restore this without making matters worse, and that's going to be really, really tricky, to be honest. So we'll give that some thought as well as we go. Okay.